So there are some people out there that believe that Liito Kala cells are actually good. Um, they might be cheap, but really at the end of the day, these Samsung 30Ts, I pulled them out of a Dewalt pack, and as you can see, they tested at 3,000 mAh, so full capacity still pretty much. Samsung 40Ts, you can buy them new for $4 or $5, 18650 battery store, bulk battery, IMR, I think. I see them on sale quite a bit, so there are better options out there. If you want lithium iron phosphate and you want 26650s, you can get the A123 M1B cells for essentially $1 a piece. Go on eBay, look up A123 40 volt, and you'll see the modules pop up. I got one tested at over 95% capacity. So the options are out there. You don't need to buy off Aliexpress, guys. Don't buy your cells off Aliexpress. They're not all garbage. They're mostly garbage, and you're still paying a pretty, full retail price for what you could get from a reputable seller, 18650 battery store, bulk battery, IMR, lithium ion wholesale, whoever. But those are the big ones in the US. So I'm going to show you one way you kind of get a feel for what the actual discharge rate is of your cells. So this is just about done charging here. This thing can only do 20 amps, max of 85 watts, so for one cell it can do 20 amps. This cell though is rated for more than 20 amps. It's rated for I think 35, and it does have a very, very low internal resistance. Just doing a DC IR test, I'm getting results of about 11. And these are kind of used cells. They were in a pack, so I don't know what they come out like when they're fresh new, but one thing you can kind of look at, I'm just going to shut this off. It's just about done. No, it is done. So one thing you're going to want to look at is the voltage drop when you initially apply the load. And this is kind of one way of, if you only have power resistors, if you don't have something that actually measures the capacity coming out of the battery, if you just have something that applies a load, this is a good way to kind of get a feeling of where your cell is as far as discharge capacity, or how far is it degraded from its original discharge capacity. So we're going to do discharge, and we're going to max this out at 20. And yes, I know my cell holder is only rated for 10. And I'm going to do this down to 3 volts just because I don't really care to go all the way down. It's just not really necessary for the test I'm doing. Okay, so really you should let this sit for a little while. I can't remember what the IEC standards are, but you should let it sit for a bit, and the voltage will go down just a little bit, but I'm just going to kind of start this right now. Another thing you kind of want to do, or at least I'm going to do, sometimes I do measure how hot the cell gets, and I compare it to what Battery Mooch and HKJ, have tested in the past. That's another great way to see if your cell's real or not. New cells should test very, very similarly. If you run them at a certain discharge, they should finish at the temperature you see Mooch and HKJ getting. If they're getting way hotter than that, it's a fake, it's a lower discharge cell. So what I'm paying attention to here is how far is the voltage going to drop right off the bat. And I see 386 was I think we settled in the low 3/8. Kind of goes fast there. So you can kind of do your DCIR test that way. Say the first number I saw, the first real number, you see it kind of flash in the 4s, but it really settled down into the low 3/8. Say it's 386. Okay, that's 20, so that's 34? Yeah. So it's 0.34 divided by 20, and that comes out to 0.17? 0.17, so 17 milliohms, which is about right. I wish I could kind of do this again for you guys, but you'll see we're at 3.6768, and we're a full minute in or more. You know, we've already pulled almost 400 mAh. This is at 20 amps. The cell is still above its nominal voltage of 3.6 at a 20 amp discharge. Generally speaking, a cell, when you hit it with its max continuous discharge, is going to drop to about 3.5. If it drops lower than 3.5, you've probably exceeded its max continuous discharge. And it's just all based on internal resistance, and because internal resistance is directly proportional to its max rated discharge, you're going to see that the voltage drop, whatever the max number is going to put it right around that 3.6, sometimes down to 3.5 number on these NMC cells. For lithium iron phosphate, it's a little bit different. I know for my A123 cells, when they get hit hard with, you know, a 30 amp discharge, they drop down below 3 volts. And according to the charts, you know, the discharge graphs that I've seen, they drop down to like 2.5 when you hit them with a full 40-50 amps, and then they just kind of sit there. So, I still have my thermometer over here. This thing's probably getting toasty already. Yeah, we're at 41. So, because I've already measured the temperature on these, I know they came out of a legitimate source, so I don't need to measure the temperature at the end. But I will let the nice cold, kind of cold Arizona winter air come in, because you do not want your cells going past. Okay, you never want them to go past 80. Never, ever, 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 ever. That is no good. That is dangerous. Really, you don't want them going past 70, and if you can help it, you'd like to keep them under 60. 60 to 70 is going to be your max that you would want to see. That's still going to cause some damage. 80, if you're running the cell so hard that it's hitting 80 by the end of the discharge cycle, good luck getting more than 300 cycles out of it. If it's an NMC cell, you are running it at its absolute max, and heat is the #1 killer of lithium ion. All lithium ion cells, heat is the #1 degrading factor. So you see, we're almost halfway through the discharge. We're coming up on 1400 now, and we're still 3.46. So like I was saying, the cell holds its voltage really well even at 20 amps because it is a genuine 35 amp cell. The 40T surprisingly holds really well up against this cell too. It's just right off the bat, the 30T does hit a bit harder. So past 1500 mAh and we're at 3.43. I'm guessing that my last one was 2,717 when it cut off at 3 volts. This will probably be similar. I don't think I'm going to bore you guys sitting through this, but you know, when you're halfway through this, you're going to see 50 degrees Celsius, and that means that by the time you get to the end of this, you're going to be in the 60s. And if you run it all the way down to 2.5, you could be in the 70s. So keep that in mind. Some cells do have a temperature-dependent cutoff. They'll be rated for 50 amps, but it's temperature-dependent on staying under 80. Trying to think, is it Lishan that has that? think it might be Lishan. I know Molicel does it. So really, you know, when the Molicel P42A says it's a 45 amp cell or whatever, it's a 35 amp cell. The P45B, from what Mooch has said, it's not a 50 amp cell because you can't run it the whole discharge at 50 amps. It'll get too hot. It's a 40 amp cell. But even then, you're pushing it. And I'm sitting right under 50 right now, so that makes me feel pretty good. Maybe I will have you guys sit through this whole thing, because it's not going to be that much longer. You're going to see your highest temps are usually like right in here at the cell. Sometimes the middle isn't always as hot. It usually will be towards the end, but about a couple millimeters in is where it starts to get real toasty. Where can I get the best kind of... So this is going to start going down even faster. So once you hit like 3.2, the voltage really starts to go. And once you hit 3 volts, there's not much under there. It'd be funny if we hit about the same capacity, because these things are really tight. They're all right at 3,000. And if you look at discharge curves too, you'll see that cells actually perform their best between about 35 and 40 Celsius. They'll put out even more capacity than they would at room temp, you know, 25 Celsius, 20 Celsius, which is why they perform so poorly at colder temps. Oh yeah, this is going to be very similar. And you'll also see the voltage rebound at the end here. Yes, it's going to be so close. 2700 on the dot. And look, we've rebounded up to 3.26, 27, 28, 29. This is normal. But, you know, if you're rebounding way more than this, keep in mind this is a 4-wire measurement. There are voltage sense leads that do not have current going through them, so that plays a factor in here. This is purely the underload voltage of the cell that we're seeing. So for it to go up 0.35, 0.40, that's normal. To go up 0.7 volts, that's not normal. That's very high internal resistance. The other number we want to check too is the milliwatt hours, 9324. And the last one I had was 951, yeah. So again, very similar, 9.32 versus 9.51. Both of them really close in milliamp hours. And temperature-wise, we're still up there. This would have definitely hit 60 Celsius had I not had this window open. It's probably 10, 15 Celsius at most out there. So there you go, guys. Liito Kala, they don't have cells that can do this. I'm sorry, they do. In, like, you know, the 3200, 32700 size, they do. 18650, 21700, they bullshit all their ratings. The number that's on the cell, like printed on the wrap, yeah, that's the pulse discharge rate, and that's usually exaggerated. The capacity, that's usually exaggerated too. Those 32700s, they don't test for 7,000 milliamp hours. They test for like 6. So, have a good night.